pretty rare experience, and it's a really valuable thing to be able to get into a wine region and be able to talk to the people that are responsible for turning it into a wine region. So to be able to talk to that first generation, the people who actually made that decision to see green fields and turn it into vineyards, is really important. Those that will be following on can look back on this and say that this is a collection of people that really made it happen. So Sandy Haig is the first Mad Bastard in the room, but what was the inspiration, Sandy? What was the thinking behind it?
I set the Coonawarra vignerons up with communications in the early days, in the, I suppose, late 60s. And I met up with a chap called Jim Hazelgrove, who was working at Mildara at the time. He said, why don't we plant grapes in Mt Gambier? We've got a few acres there. And so we did. And then the bank manager said, well, this is serious. No sense of humour, the bugger. In 1982, we put the first Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in. And then a couple of years later, some more. And then another lot a year or two later. There was an acre or so first, then another 2 or 3 acres, and we've ended up with about 10 acres all told. It's been a long and arduous learning process. Frosts and diseases, and we initially irrigated the vines, but David Moss, who was the horticultural advisor for the area and a lovely gentleman, said that your Mt Gambier soil, which is volcanic over lava with limestone and sand underneath, he said it's very moisture retentive. So once the vines are up and standing, we thought we turned the water off, and we haven't irrigated for, I can't remember when, many years ago.
There's huge potential in this area. We've got water, we've got soils, we've got the limestone sub-base, the areas are relatively flat, fairly easy to establish the vineyard. As you see here, there aren't a lot of hillsides, and there's fabulous potential here for well-managed vineyards to produce great fruit and consequently good cool climate wines.
I always knew the ground was good. It's a good grazing country, not very arable.
Yep.
So we deep ripped it, put the stones in the middle and stuck the grapes in. And the theory was I could put $100,000 worth of vineyard in, which is the same as the centre pivot. Centre pivot would rust out the apples and grapes keep growing. It's a good soil for growing horticulture in, because we can't put a canola in it. You've got to have a deep-rooted crop to be able to tap the whole lot of the nutrients that are actually in that profile there. Topsoil, 85% rock. A layer of clay, which is not sodic, which is the roots actually get through it. See the roots will come through it here. So the clay's of good structure. The nutrients at the top of the profile is the same as the nutrients at the bottom, down to the limestone, which is around about a metre.
I watched Lyle Pudney for 10 years develop his vineyard. Then in 2004, I did a block with Lyle. And then after that, we bought a block of 165 acres alongside Lyle's vineyard, and we developed that over 2 years, putting in Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. Both Lyle's vineyard and ours is on what they call the Congarong flints. It's an alluvial bed of stone, very hard, very rich in minerals, and we believe that the minerals in the soil will actually give us a flavour in our fruit completely distinct of any area in Australia.
There's quite a variation in soils, in aspect, and we can take the extremes from the Congarong flints over there to the deeper volcanic soils around Mt Gambier, particularly on the side of the volcano area in the square mile and just south. And you can get out into the shallower soils on limestone as well, much akin to the terroirs of Coonawarra. The proven varieties tend to be early maturing varieties, in particularly the sparkling Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but also perhaps dry whites like Riesling. Riesling's done very well here. I think Cabernet looks promising here.
We started growing Cab Sav grapes back in '98 because Alan's particularly keen on Cabernet Sauvignon. We were growing cattle, we had cattle and a couple of sheep, but we needed something else.
It's making an Italian style wine, not a heavy Cabernet. It doesn't need anything into it to soften it down. It's just nice as it is.
And it's not a big alcoholic content.
This place also came with the added bonus of a couple of acres of Riesling grapes. There really aren't that much Riesling grown around here at all. So it's actually a delight to have one of those grapes and have it really as almost like because it's only a small vineyard, and use it a bit as an experimental vineyard for the region.
Before we purchased the property, we dug test holes and we checked out the soil profile, and then we had people from Mildara Blast come and have a look, and they give it the tick. We purchased the property in '97, and we planted the block of Pinot in '97. We did a lot of homework, and we worked out what would grow successfully down here, and we had to stick to the cooler climate grapes.
We're kind of pinning our hopes on Pinot. Now, there's a lot of talk about Tassie and whatever in terms of climate change. If climate change kicks in with a degree of effect that is predicted, these cooler climate sites are going to be the last bastions on the mainland, unless you're up in the hills somewhere, of Pinot. Sauvignon Blanc as well, and Chardonnay I think will be the staples, and Riesling, there's certainly some good Riesling being grown around the place. So it'll be those traditional cooler varieties that take us somewhere. And I've had discussions with grape growers at Coonawarra who say, well, you can't grow grapes down there for any number of reasons, and they trot out a dozen reasons. And I mean, this is proof that you can.
We've got Coonawarra wines based in Coonawarra, but for the last 5 or 6 years we've been getting grapes from Mt Gambier vineyards. For me as a wine owner or label owner, that the idea is to get the absolute very best grapes you can to make the very best wine you can. Coonawarra can do Cabernet and Shiraz, as good as or better than anybody. But when you get to those cooler climate varieties, that's where Mt Gambier really, excels. You can just see it in the temperature and the grapes that you do get down here.
We get a lot of rainfall, and we get rainfall increasingly through, in a normal year, the kind of autumn ripening period, and that's a potential hazard. But on the other hand, in summer we get these cooling sea breezes. About 3 o'clock, if you're on the back hill, you can hear it coming through the forest, and you get this breeze rushes up and cools things down. So it has a moderating effect, and of course the temperature variation, which some people see as a disadvantage, is an effect of the sea. We don't have that extreme that you do with the more continental sites.
We look at wines like Chablis, Burgundy, that is a very similar climate as temperature goes, and the soils that there are in this region, being a quite a large region, I think we've got the soils which can emulate anything that they're doing easily.
Oh, look, the fruit out of Mt Gambier region last year, I don't think that you could find better anywhere. I think it was superb. It's just starting to hit its straps with the quality of fruit. I think if the potential can be realised of what we've got here, I think there's no reason why it can't get the recognition it deserves.
We've been talking to some of the majors for periods of 10 or 15 years. And it's interesting at this stage that none of the majors have come and purchased land. They're ready to buy fruit from the areas and have done so and produced wines very, very successfully.
Orlando were buying a bit of fruit off a number of growers here. A smaller number of growers, perhaps about 4 growers for instance. Mildara, South Cork Wines were buying off 1 or 2 growers.
We had contracts up until about a year or so ago for the previous, 6 or 7 years. but in the last year or so the contracts are a little bit harder to come by. Having said that, we sell the fruit to the same company for the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years.
And if you can get corporates on side, well and good, but corporates look after corporates, that's their job, and in the long term, they're not going to look after you. They'll serve their own interests. So that's why I think there's a more independent attitude and a more cynical attitude perhaps from a number of us down here about that relationship.
If I had a dream of where we should be, it'd been known for Pinot and whites and sparklings, dominated by smaller family businesses rather than Treasury or Orlando or Hardy's, and that there is a processing facility on a main road with a cellar door that can really fly the flag. Certainly in promotion of the area we need more products made locally and perhaps made for us, and it won't be until we get a great number of products that we'll get that bulk of recognition that I guess we'll be seeking in the future, in the near future.
We get out and about a fair bit, and if Mt Gambier as a wine region is to go anywhere, it's that promotion that has to happen. People, every week when we go to a market, people say, "Where are you?" And we say, "Oh, we're 15 k's southeast of Mt Gambier." "Oh, I didn't know that." And we've been putting out stuff and selling wine for years, and it illustrates just what a constant challenge it is with a new region.
We've got to be different. Not much use going down the same bloody sheep race.
Coonawarra, is seen down here as the epitome, but Coonawarra's been going a long while, and it's only in the last 30 or 40 years that it's hit its straps in marketing terms, probably the last decade or so. So it takes time, but you've got to be consistent, and unless you've got some wine labelled Mt Gambier, which says, there is good stuff down there, it's not going to happen.
It's almost impossible to try and promote a region like the Limestone Coast, which can grow everything well, but it's like saying, it's like saying France grows good grapes. Well, they do in some areas, but not in others, and the climate is those small amounts of differences makes a huge amount in the final product when you're trying to create a super premium wine. We're definitely behind the Mt Gambier name to the point where we will change our branding to incorporate Mt Gambier as a single brand and separate it from Coonawarra itself, because I think it's important. It's
pretty tough going in the wine industry at the moment for everybody. But I think if you've got quality sells, no matter what you're producing.
I think the product is good. It's obviously been well received by sommeliers, restaurateurs, but most importantly the public.
In terms of what Mt Gambier be remembered for, I think it'll always be niche, because we've never had that investment from corporations. It'll always be family-run businesses doing their own thing in combination with other enterprises, whether it's sheep, as we saw at Lyle's place, or whether it's cattle here and irrigating a bit of lucerne or whatever. It'll be boutique, I think, and our big challenge is going to be to get more labels out there.